today I've got something a little different. See, toe spins are much easier the larger the board gets. Hence why I've dug out this longboard. This is actually what I learned this trick on back in 2010, I guess. And as you can see, this board's pretty old and haggard now. But any longboard will make this a lot easier. So if you have one, give that a go. I will be doing this on a freestyle board in a minute, just to prove it can be done on each. But for the sake of learning, if you have a longer plank, give it a go on that. Quick note before we go any further. The title card says Toespin. The name below this video or on this post, if you're on the website, says Toespin. I'm going to say Toespin a lot. I don't want to hear anyone in the comments calling this a pirouette, because it isn't. It looks like it should be called a pirouette, but there's this weird fluke of skateboarding history that means a pirouette is a totally different thing. And if you're interested in that, if you want to know the difference between a Toespin and a pirouette, stick around, because right at the very end, I'll be talking about that. The first steps towards the Toespin can be done just on the floor without a board, but I'm going to illustrate them on the longboard to show you how we're moving around it. Because we're not going to start with a full Toespin, we're going to start with something simpler, something that Bob Lofting once called a 360 walkover. We start in a regular riding position, but we bring our front foot back and point it at the nose. Then we're going to step across as if we're going to walk the dog. From this position, we've got to unwind and face the other direction, spinning the front foot round to the tail as we go. And then all we have to do is step back across and finish the whole rotation, coming back to our regular stance. Now, as I said, if you don't have a longboard, you can practice this just on the floor. Start here, draw the front foot back, step over, turn, and repeat. You can do that over and over and over again, but that is what's going to lead us to the Toespin. Now, if you do have a longboard and you are getting into dancing, this in itself can be a step, it can be a move. But if you're going to do it, please don't do it in a robot straight line. Make sure you carve with it. As you start the step, lean into your toes to start carving backside. And then as you step back, carve to the heels instead. So toes and across, and toes, so I'm back on my heels. Repeat. Now, unfortunately, when we get back down to freestyle boards, the 360 walkover, while not impossible, is not really something that works that well. Same principle applies, but because it's such a small space, you are going to feel very cramped up. I recommend still trying it just stationary to get used to the motions, but I don't recommend trying it rolling, and I certainly don't recommend trying to persevere with getting it smooth. I don't think I've ever seen someone do this on a freestyle board and make it look good. If you can prove me wrong, please do. When you're ready to make the move to freestyle boards, regardless of whether you're starting off with stationary 360 walkovers or going straight to the Toespin, you want your front foot to be about this far from the truck. Ideally, the ball of the foot should be as central as possible. And in what should hopefully be fairly obvious, you're going to want to keep your heel lifted off the deck. You should really be just on the balls of your foot for this one. It functions much like a walk the dog, apart from instead of the board moving, you're going to move on top of it. When you've got the 360 walkover and you're ready to jump up to the Toespin, it's time to get rid of the board. This is one of the few tricks that I advocate learning just on the floor, no board needed, because you've got to get this spin right before you can do it on something with wheels. Now, that's also one of the good things about this. You can practice this literally anywhere. In a dirty car park, sitting at home, just walking down the street. You might look a bit weird, but it'll work. Now, get yourself into your starting position and wind across the body. This pre-wind is what's going to throw you into the spin. So you've got to twist up slightly first. This bend at the knees doesn't have to be graceful. This isn't ballet. All that is that when you straighten your legs, you go weightless for a split second, reducing friction just enough that you can spin round. So pre-wind, bend knees, and then push off this foot. Use that to push yourself around as you throw your arms. Now, it'll take a while. As you can see there, I juddered, I fell forward. If I'd done that on a board, I would have fallen off. Practice this until you can stay pretty much straight upright. As soon as you lean, as soon as you wobble, you're gonna come off that board. Oh, keep going. Bit more practice needed. Once you feel comfortable just whipping into a spin, it's time to take it onto a board. But this isn't something you want to do stationary. It probably can be done, but it's a lot harder because your weight is going to be shifting forwards and backwards throughout this spin. And without forward momentum, all that's going to happen, that was a lot sharper than I thought it would be. You're going to end up pushing the board away. Do this rolling at a very slow pace. Doesn't have to be too fast, but just the smallest amount of forward momentum will help keep that board under you as you spin. Assuming you're rolling at a low to moderate speed and your front foot is in the right position, this is just like doing it on the floor. Don't overthink it. Just focus on having a nice clean push off while keeping your heel off the deck. If you know the length of your board, if you are comfortable on it, you should be able to find that back foot position. But this is why the front foot position is so crucial. If you're too far back, as you finish this spin, you'll have no room to land on. If you're too far forward, you'll spin and your weight will be so far over the board, you'll push it behind you. Try to stay as central as possible whenever you're doing this trick. If you can do this on the ground, perfectly fine. When you get on a board, it's going wrong, and yet you know your foot position is exactly right, there's still a couple of things that could be going wrong. First of all, you have to make sure that you lift your heel properly. Sometimes you can get away with leaving the heel down a little bit on floor, especially if it's, a polished floor, something smooth, kitchen floor, tiled floor, whatever. But you can't do that on a board. If your foot, imagine this is a foot, if your foot is dead center like that, when the toes are up, when the heel goes down, you're actually a lot further back. And that means that you're going to get stuck and you're going to be a lot further back on the board than you think. Make sure you've got your foot lifted up. Keep the heel clear at all times. Now the second problem could be related to the board itself. You'll notice, again, no concave. Longboard I'm sitting on, no concave. If your board rises up significantly at the edges, there is a good chance that your heel could catch on that as you spin. Now, you can do this on a concave board, it's not impossible, but the steeper that concave gets, the higher you've got to lift your heel to make sure you get a clean spin. There's a bump there. I chose this angle really well. There's one of those expansion slots there. Can't roll over it, can you? Idiot. Okay guys, one last thing. No matter what you do, no matter how tempting it might be, no matter what you're linking this with, don't jump. As the name implies, it's a toe spin. You are spinning around your toes. You are not spinning in the air. If you do this, it's actually a pirouette. And that leads me nicely to that weird story I was going to tell. So if you've stuck around this long and you're in for some boring history nonsense, hey, it's time for a treat. Right, if you've made it this far, well done you. Hope you've learned the toe spin, or hope you at least have some ideas on how to get it. Now, I promised a bit of a history lesson. I'm going to give you one, because I've always looked at this and thought, looks like a pirouette. Why isn't it called a pirouette? Turns out a pirouette is a standing, jumping 360, a 360 body varial. That doesn't seem to make any sense. But I've asked around, I've done some digging, I've asked some older guys, much more knowledgeable than me. As far as I can figure out, the reason those names are that way around is because the pirouette was the first one done. Before someone worked out how to spin on a spot, like jumping up, turning 360 and landing back on a board, it's much easier, it's much more obvious. So because that was the first one done, that was called the pirouette. And when this one came around that looks like a pirouette, it's called the Toespin, which in itself is quite a straightforward and simple name. It just means that when we're looking back at things 50 years later, almost, it seems a bit backwards. But that's the way it is. I know longboarders call this a pirouette. I'm sorry, guys. It was a toe spin first. It should be called a toe spin. Know your history, respect your history. Do you care? No. Do I care? Yes. I think these things matter. You might differ. But regardless, don't post below this video calling it a pirouette, because it isn't, and that's why. Right, well that was fun. Let's go skate. Or not. Let's go lock ourselves in our house and stay away from viruses and peoples.